Hello guys. So welcome to Illustrator. When you actually start working in Illustrator and you first open it up, it's probably going to look a little bit like this. And what we have is any recent files that we might have worked on. We have templates that we can just start depending on what you want. You can even say there's, more presets here. And essentially you choose which one that you want depending on what we're doing, right? So if I'm doing video and film, if I'm doing art and illustration, now it doesn't mean that when I start off that whatever I do, I'm stuck in it. It just means this is my starting point, and I can always modify things afterwards, which is fine for what we're doing. But it makes it a little bit easier. So for example, if I'm going for print, it's going to configure itself more for resolution, CMYK, and which is the color palette for printing. If I go for film and video or web, then we're going to configure more towards RGB, which is the color and the resolution for a screen, not for an actual print. So since we're working with vector graphics, we'll basically be doing that, and I'm just going to choose, just for an example, the film and video, and anything that we'll be working on, just so that you know. If you have an OK computer, 1280 by 720. If you have a good computer, 1920 by 1080, and everything's running smooth. We are not going to be doing 4K, and we are definitely not going to be doing 8K, unless even if you have a monster machine, nobody, unless they have 4K screens and 8K screens, would even be able to utilize it, and the files are way too big, and this is an introductory class, so that's really not necessary. So I'm choosing film and video, HD, HDV 720, which is 1280 by 720, the low end HD. And everything else is now configured. And I'm just going to say create. And this is what we look at. So this video is just about the interface, so we can get used to just where we can find stuff inside of Illustrator. So right now, this is my screen. If I move my mouse roller up and down, you see I can go up and down. If I hold down Control and move my mouse roller, I can go left to right. I can also grab these guys here. And if I hold down Spacebar and left mouse button, I can move it around. This may be a little hard on the eyes. We'll fix that in a second. And what you're seeing here is the screen resolution and what's referred to as title safe areas. So if this is a representation of my screen, you don't want things to go into these areas, because depending on the screen somebody's watching your video or any sort of image that's going to be on YouTube or whatever, some of this stuff might be cropped out or cut off or doing some weird stuff. So we like to stay in here. For what we're doing, it's not going to matter as much because we're using vector graphics, but we'll talk about that. And just so that your eyes aren't blown out, I'm just going to go over to the layers, and you see we have layers similar to Photoshop. I'm going to just go in and just make a rectangle just so I can just make it a little bit easier on the eyes. So we'll just temporarily do that. I know it's blinding you, but that's okay. So this is the interface of Illustrator. Now your interface may look different. What we're going to be using is, if you go up to the top right where it says Workspace, we're using, at least starting out, the Essentials Classic. Each one of these, if you go to them, changes the configuration and what should be showing. So, but what we're going to be doing is Essentials Classic. And that's going to give us all access to all the tools, and we'll all be consistent with that layout. So over on the left, I have all of my tools that I'll be using, and we'll talk about that in the following videos. I just want to show you where everything is before we jump in. So on the left, we have our tools. If I put my cursor over it, any of these, you can see it shows me the tool. And it shows me a letter in parentheses, which is actually what my shortcut on my keyboard is. So this would be V, this would be A, this would be Y, and so on. So this is how you remember or start to remember what are those shortcuts. T for the type tool, this backslash for the line segment, the rectangular, like I just made this and put it on a layer, paintbrush. So these are all my tools. This is also, my scaling tool. If I click, anytime they have these little tildes, these little things on the bottom corner, it means there's more tools underneath it that are related to whatever that tool is. So inside of the scale tool, for example, we have the shear tool and we have the reshape tool. So my scale tool, if we go over, let's just click here, is S. And we can see that, yep, that's my scale tool right there. Just like if I had V, you see it chooses my selection tool, and A is my direct select. We'll talk about the differences between these. So these are my tools, and feel free to click on these to see what else is in there because you might find some really cool stuff. I'm also going to include a shortcut sheet so that you can actually investigate and look at a lot of these. We're not going to spend an immense amount of time in Illustrator, and if you've taken graphic design, you already are semi-comfortable probably with this program. So let's go down to here. So we have our hand tool, which is, I can also reach just by, if I'm on any of these tools, just hitting the space bar and holding that down, and then left mouse clicking and dragging. And that's just so I can move around. This is like a virtual desktop. Okay, so Alt, or if you're on a Mac, it'd probably be Option. And moving the mouse roller in and out allows me to zoom in and out. And this giant area is basically like my my table, and I can put stuff in and out of my table, and it's like a work table. So, but this area here is the only one I should really worry about inside of this. And for this particular template, is this area that's inside of the black lines, because that would be my screen. There's my zoom in also. Where if I click on that, I can zoom in, and if I hold down Alt or Option and left mouse click, I can zoom out. Illustrator works off of shapes, so we'll talk about this. This is my foreground color, my background, or not foreground and background, but my fill and my stroke. And this defaults it, D. So whenever I have a shape, and once again, we're going to get into this later, I can click, double click, and change what the fill is going to be. And then my stroke is the outline around it. That's that line going around. So whenever I make a shape, this is the default, my foreground, my stroke. If I want it to be a gradient, and then we see a gradient window pops up that we can edit, or maybe we don't want it to fill at all. It dropped the fill out because I hit none with the fill in front. So if I go back to here and then say, oh, I don't want a stroke, I select the stroke and hit none. And now you see it has no stroke. If I want a stroke with that one's up front, I click that and now it has it again. We'll get into more of these. There's different drawing modes. And do I want to change full screen mode, which is F, if I keep hitting F to hide my user interface. And then inside of here is even more tools, and I can customize. Right now, most of my tools are all exposed. But you can see there's like, oh, I want to click or hide or show certain groupings of tools. Don't worry about that for right now. This is my document. Up at the top, once again, we have whatever tool we're using. It's telling us, or at least what we have selected. And it's telling us the information. So when I select this, it's a rectangle, it's filled with red and has a black outline with a stroke weight that I can change, and those are in points. What does the stroke look like? And there you'll see there's presets. And how is it defined? Is it dotted? Is it stylized? And there's a whole bunch that you can actually get. What's the opacity? There's different styles. Do I want to recolor something? Align to the artboard. And you notice when I click on this, all this changes based off of what I might have selected. So this is, when this is selected, this is the information on this one shape. Now, over to the right, I have different menus that are condensed, or windows that are condensed. So if I go to window up here, all of these can be inside of here, and I can customize that layout. So right now, you notice my layers aren't showing. So if I go into here and I click on layers, then they pop up. That's the layer icon. And just like before, putting my cursor over these tells me what these are. So if I want to access gradient, and under gradient, there's more information on the stroke. Show options, and it gives me even more information. So whenever you click on these little guys here, it gives you even more robust controls on adjusting whichever one of these that you're trying to affect. This hides it back. So symbols, brushes, this is, we'll go over that a little bit later, but we really won't be using a lot of these for what we'll be doing because we're going to be mostly dealing with shapes. I can also click on the tab to hide it back in. And these guys are how do I want to color things. Over to the right are the properties that are more in-depth. So if I actually have multiple objects, let's take this, copy and paste it. And we have two of them now. Make this one blue. And let's say I took both of these, I drag select with my selection, oops, and I'm going to deselect that background. So let's just say, oops, jinkies. Let's go to the layers. And right now, all these guys are on here. We haven't really talked about that. But a layer is like a sandwich. All these guys are on the same layer. So if I make a new layer, and then I say I want these two, click, click, and drag it over here, I can now lock my background, so you notice I can't accidentally grab it. But now here I can grab these guys, and you see layer 2 where these are, this tells me they're highlighted. And now I can go in, and with those selected, I can now go in and align them. Or if I move these like these, let's say, oh, I want to align them like this. And that's just what some of these tools are. But once again, the properties and everything changes based off of the shapes you have selected. My libraries, which I haven't really loaded any yet, is where you can actually save or put things in here to actually access them and use them over and over again, or download them from other people. And that's basically the rough interface of it. We're going to get more into it, but that's just a general. The only other thing is if I have multiple documents, I can actually set them up. So if I had two documents, maybe I'm working between two documents, copying from one to the other, I can always go in and just copy between them.